Hi everyone, good morning from Educating Path. It is the teaching job vacancy in Jawaharlal Nehru University. So Jawaharlal Nehru University, it is a central government of India university. It is located in New Delhi. So they are recruiting the teaching faculty in different discipline, different subjects. So the essential qualification as per the government norm or UGC norm. The good PhD degree in concerned or relevant or allied subjects, master degree with a 55 percentage of mark, minimum of 8-year experience of teaching is important. The scale of pay level 13A. So the scale of pay starting from 1,31,000 to 2,17,000. So details of the job position. School of Arts Aesthetic Associate Professor job. So here different category reservation status, PHOH category, SC category, SC backlog category, unreserved category, OBC category, SC backlog category, SC category. So in this category, the School of Arts and Aesthetic Associate Professor job vacancy is available. Next job position is here, Associate Professor in School of Biotechnology. Next third job position, Associate Professor in School of Computational Integrative Science. Fourth job position, Associate Professor job vacancy in School of Computer System Sciences. The next job position, Associate Professor job vacancy in School of Engineering in Civil Department. Next, Associate Professor job position in School of Engineering in Environmental Engineering. Next, the Associate Professor job vacancy in School of Engineering in Chemical Engineering subject. The next job position, Associate Professor job position in Computer Science and Engineering. The next job position, Associate Professor in Electronic Engineering Department. The next job position, Associate Professor in Electronics Engineering Department. The next job position, Associate Professor in Mechanical Engineering Department. The next job position, Associate Professor in Environmental and Atmospheric Process. Next job position, Associate Professor in Mineral Exploration and Ore Geology Department. Next job position, Associate Professor of Immunology. Next job position, Associate Professor of Organizational and Evolutionary Biology. Next job position, Associate Professor of Plant Physiology. Next job position, Associate Professor of Genome Biology. Next job position, Associate Professor of Biostatics or Mathematics or Biology. Next job position, Associate Professor of Animal Science or Animal Genetics. Next job position, Associate Professor of Plant Genetics. Next job position, Associate Professor of Human Genetics or Human Genomics. Next job position, Associate Professor of Physical Science. Next job position, Associate Professor of Sanskrit and Indian Studies. Next job position, Associate Professor in Center of Study of Law and Governance. Next job position, Associate Professor of Special Center for Molecular Medicine. Next job position, Associate Professor Special Center for Nanoscience. Next job position, Associate Professor of Center for African Studies. Next job position, associate professor in US Latin American Studies. Next job position, associate professor in Latin America Studies. Next job position, associate professor in US Studies. Next job position, associate professor in Latin American Studies. Next job position, associate professor in Inter-American Studies. Next job position, associate professor in comparative politics and political theory department. Next job position, associate professor in Center for East Asian Studies. Next job position, associate professor in Center for European Studies. Next job position, associate professor in Center for Indo-Pacific Studies. Next job position, associate professor in Center for Inner Asian Studies. Next job position, associate professor in Center for International Legal Studies. Next job position, associate professor in International Legal Studies. Next job position, associate professor in Political Geography. Next job position, associate professor in International Trade and Development Department. Next job position, associate professor in Central Russian and Asian Studies. Next job position, associate professor in South Asian Studies. Next job position, associate professor in West Asian Studies. Next job position, associate professor in Arabic and African Studies. Next job position, associate professor in Chinese and Southeast Asian Studies. Next job position, associate professor in English Studies. Next job position, associate professor in French and Francophone Studies. Next job position, associate professor in French and Francophone Studies. Next job position, associate professor in German Studies. Next job position, associate professor in Bangala. Next job position, associate professor in Urdu. Next job position, associate professor in Japanese Studies. Next job position, associate professor in Korean Studies. Next job position, associate professor in Linguistics. Next job position, associate professor in Empowerment Cell. Next job position, associate professor in Economic Studies and Planning. Next job position, associate professor in Economic Studies and Planning. Next job position, associate professor in Historical Studies. Next job position, associate professor in Media Studies. Next job position, associate professor in Philosophy. Next job position, associate professor in Political Studies. Next job position, associate professor in Social Medicine and Community Health. Next job position, associate professor in Science Policy. Next job position, associate professor in Human Physical Geography. Next job position, associate professor in Regional Development Study. Next job position, associate professor in Human Economic and Health Geography. Next job position, associate professor in Social Studies. Next job position, associate professor in Women's Studies. Next job position, associate professor in Jagir Hussain Center for Educational Studies. Next job position, associate professor in Group of Adult Education. So in this above all the department, associate professor job vacancy are available in Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi. So general instruction, eligible candidate, they can apply through online mode, only. So through online mode means that the university website. So university website address www.ucl.ac.in. jnu.ac.in, www.jnu.ac.in. So in this website you can open it and you can apply through online mode. So last date for applying for teaching job in Jawaharlal Nehru University. So last date is 30 August 2022. Last date is 30 August 2022. So application fees 2000. It is a non-refundable. Application fees is 2000. It is non-refundable. The candidate belonging to general OBC and EWS category. So the candidates are belonging to general OBC EWS category. They have to pay 2000 rupees. It is a non-refundable. But that SC, ST, PW, physical disability and women candidate, they no need to pay. So no application fees. So thank you. All the best for your future from educating path. Like that, if you want to get a government job notification, then you have to subscribe the educating path YouTube channel. Thank you.